What's going on, guys? Welcome back to The Shelf, and today we are talking about the new 2025 horror film Together, starring Dave Franco and Alison Brie, and directed by Michael Shanks. Now, at the top, I just want to get a few things out of the way. There was some controversy surrounding this movie a couple months back. Apparently, there was a creator who had written a very similar script that Dave Franco and Alison Brie had allegedly read for and were very much aware of. In that script, there are things that are supposedly very similar to things that you'll find in this movie Together. Michael Shanks has since come out with a statement, kind of trying to disavow any, allegations of copyright infringement or anything like that, plagiarism. And the studio, Neon, has backed him in this, it seems. So since then, I haven't really seen anything about it. It seems to have been just one of those cases where it's, two people having very parallel lines of thinking. You see it all the time with the twin movie phenomenon that happens a lot. When all these conversations started to crop up, it kind of was a bummer because this is a movie that I've been excited for a little bit now. And I was like, damn, that's gonna suck if this is a movie that I can't really get behind on that level. And, I feel comfortable now saying that, I don't really think that this movie is, something that you can't necessarily go and support. I think that we're in the clear as far as that's all concerned. So I'm also not going to get into a ton of spoilers, but I would recommend that you see the movie first before watching this review. I'm going to talk about thematically what this movie's got going on and things like that. Not necessarily, direct beat-by-beat plot spoilers or anything like that, but yeah, it would just help if you've already seen the movie. So with all that out of the way, let's just jump right into it and talk about this movie. So what I will say out of the gate, right up front, is I very much enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's paced very well, and it's a really great mixture of really downright eerie moments, effective body horror, and comedy. I thought this movie was pretty funny as well. And it leans into that. It's very much trying to be funny and sort of, in some cases, make light of this really crazy situation that's unfolding. So this movie's juggling a lot of different things, and I think it executes it all pretty much perfectly. This is a movie that I think I saw the trailer for one time. I saw it and it looked cool, and from that point on, I made sure not to watch any follow-up trailers or to, watch that first trailer again. So by the time I did sit down for this, I was essentially fresh. I really don't remember anything that's in that first trailer that I saw, which is good. I was really glad that I didn't know anything going into this movie aside from the overall premise, which, if you don't know, Dave Franco and Alison Brie, they're in a relationship. They're married in real life, so, you've got that art imitating life component of it. And so essentially what happens is they drink this magic water, I guess you'd call it, and they are inexplicably drawn towards one another to the point that their bodies are physically trying to merge into one. It's really, really interesting on that level, the way that the visual effects are done. So much so that I looked up the director, Michael Shanks, and apparently he's actually got a background in visual effects. So that lends further credence to, I think, the idea that this is not something that he plagiarized at all. He seems to have gone into this project with his visual effects background in mind, and it's very much on display in the movie as well. But so some things I did like about the movie early on are there's some clever bits of dialogue. At one point early in the movie, Alison Brie and Dave Franco are at a party, and Alison Brie makes a casual comment to Dave Franco about the fact that everyone at the party likes the fact that they're matching. I don't know if clever is the right word, but it's, a little tongue-in-cheek dialogue, sort of foreshadowing at what's to come. The movie also has this cold open where you see these two dogs and they drink of this water that Dave Franco and Alison Brie will later go on to drink, and it's giving you sort of, again, some foreshadowing as to what's going to happen. And, I think that the choice to use dogs was perhaps an homage to The Thing. It most likely is. It seems very on the nose. I don't think I'm clever for picking up on that, but it does seem like a reference to The Thing, which, is a body horror film and, one of the most well-known body horror films, I would probably say. So I liked that. It was a cool way to open the movie. and it kind of sets you up for what's coming next. I also thought that the color grading was really good. You know, the greens are very green, it's very vibrant, as well as, you know, juxtaposing that when they're in this cave where this magic water is. It's very dark and very atmospheric. Then there are like these dream sequences where things kind of get very eerie. It almost channels like Skinamarink a little bit with like those soft blues, like the TV glowing in the background or something like that, and that's like the only light source in the room. That's sort of the vibe that I was getting. So across the board, this movie looks very good, and it also sounds really, really good as well. There's this really cool ambient sort of rock soundtrack. Dave Franco's character in the movie makes rock music. So one of my only issues with this movie is, you know, the way that Dave Franco and Alison Brie, spoilers for Together, guys. I'm just going to have to explain this in order to get my thoughts across. So essentially they're hiking in the woods and they fall into this cave and it's storming outside. And so they're in this cave and they don't try to leave the cave. They're like, oh, well, because it's storming outside and it's raining, we have to stay in the cave. And I thought that was weird because they're not far from their house. They're literally walking around in the woods outside their house. So personally, if I fell in this cave, I would have gotten out of it, which they go on to do when the storm stops without any issues. Perhaps a nitpick, but personally, I didn't buy the fact that they wouldn't have just left the cave because it's storming outside. Like, that to me was like, okay. It's sort of a means to an end. You know, you have to have the movie take place. I just think that they could have found a better way to keep them there. I'm not a screenwriter, but I feel like, I don't know, I just couldn't buy into that as a reason for not leaving. Just the fact that it was raining really hard. I don't know. Especially if your house isn't that far away either. Like, it's not like they didn't have somewhere else to go. Like, they could have just left. I don't know. But so while they're in this cave, they drink this water, and you know what's going to happen. So you have this ticking clock component now where you're basically just waiting for weird shit to start happening. And the movie's actually kind of a slow burn. You know, it's only like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that. But you don't really start to get wild shit happening until, you know, well over the hour mark. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. It kept me wanting to see what was going to happen and how they were going to sort of deal with it, to the point where things get so weird that you have to acknowledge it now. Like, you can't write it off as being something else, which they do try to do early on in the film. And then eventually things start to spiral until, you know, you can't avoid what's happening. So essentially, you know, on a story level, Dave Franco and Alison Brie's character, they are in this long relationship. They have been for a while now, but they seem to be kind of at a crossroads, and, you know, they don't know if they're going to want to continue this relationship for much longer. And the movie is very much about that. It's not being subtle about that. It's obviously very much about this idea of, are you in love with someone or are you just used to them? And people not being able to be alone and out of a relationship. They need to have, you know, that codependency, that it deals with like separation anxiety in a clever way. And, you know, again, it's not subtle at all, but it's also not hard to take away different things from this movie. For instance, what the ending means, I think, is divisive, and I'm not sure myself what I think the ending it means. If it's supposed to be happy or if it's supposed to be a bad thing that happens. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, there's also just a bit of dramatic irony of them sort of kind of coming apart in this relationship while literally being forced together. You know, that's kind of funny. It's kind of ironic. It makes for a very interesting horror film, is what I'll say. And yeah, there's some funny moments in the movie that come when you wouldn't expect them to. So they're really good at sort of breaking up the tension with a bit of levity, which I always appreciate in a horror film. You know, there's some other clever lines where they're talking about their relationship, but it's actually, you can infer it to mean their current situation as well. Like, if we don't split up now, it'll just be harder later. You know, it's right down the middle. It's not going to blow your mind or anything, but it's fun. So overall, I really did enjoy this movie. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. I had a really good time with it. There were some moments that had me kind of squirming in my seat a little bit and being like, this is really happening. And, you know, it just makes you think a lot about, you know, relationships and stuff. And I wouldn't see this movie on a first date for sure. And I also wouldn't go see this movie with someone you've been with for a long time. Or maybe you could. I don't know. It's up to you guys. Use your own discretion. Your mileage will vary. But so I want to talk about the ending briefly, because throughout the movie there's this, you know, friction of whether or not these two characters want to commit to each other for the long haul. What's happening in the film is eventually they are going to form and merge into one being. And that's what happens. And I can't tell if the ending is actually good or not, because Dave Franco finally decides, hey, you know, I really do love you. I want to marry you. I think we need to just let this thing run its course and merge into one body. And I don't know if that's meant to be, looked at as like them committing to staying in a relationship that they shouldn't be in, or if it's meant to be like the opposite, where they've agreed upon the fact that they are very much in love with each other and they want to be together, so much so that they will merge their bodies into one body. I don't know which way to look at it. If it's supposed to be horrific that, you know, they're staying together despite obviously not being a good match. And the movie plays kind of fast and loose with that, where you could look at it and say, yeah, I don't think they're a good match. Or you could say, well, maybe they are a good match. And, you know, the movie doesn't really definitively tell you. You know, it kind of gives you enough to work with on your own, and you can come to your own conclusions about that. From my point of view, it didn't really seem like really we're on the same page. You know, Alison Brie is a teacher and works with kids, and Dave Franco is like still trying to chase this like music dream that he has. Yeah, it seems like they're not quite on the same track. So it's kind of open to interpretation. I'm actually very curious what other people make of this ending, if they view it as being like a positive or a negative. I really don't know what to think of it. Obviously, the notion of like merging into one body with someone is not ideal for your average person, but obviously within the rules of this movie, you know, it's not really meant to be taken like super literally, I think. What with like the messaging of the movie and having to do with relationships, I don't really know what this final statement is supposed to be saying. So let me know down in the comments what you think this ending is supposed to be. So anyway, guys, that's my review for Together. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't. We talk about new movies, old movies, physical media, and horror in general. So with all that being said, guys, please take care and watch more movies.